Good afternoon, good evening. Please come in and take a seat if you'd like to. As usual, plenty of seats in front. Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Schaefer, Vice President and Southern California Market Leader at Enterprise Community Partners. On behalf of Enterprise, welcome to Los Angeles and the Affordable Housing Design Leadership Institute keynote lecture. Our local work advancing affordable housing and community development increasingly is being done at the nexus of design, greening, and transit-oriented development. The projects being studied in this institute highlight this nexus, and indeed, I think the discussions these 2 days show us that similar issues are being faced and addressed across the country. We appreciate your joining with us to assess this evolutionary process and strategize on our best collective response. I would like to thank Katie Swenson of Enterprise and her teammates at Enterprise Design's team for their leadership in this community development space and for bringing this year's institute to Southern California. It was my expectation that I would be introducing Dean Ma, but on his behalf, we have tonight with us Professor John Mutlow. He is expert in affordable housing. We actually, I believe, reorganized the timing of this institute so it would coincide with the start of the semester so that student design teams would be engaged working with each of the groups that are being profiled during the institute. So he's a driving force behind the institute that you're all now coming to participate in. So Professor Mutlow, could you come share some words?
Thank you, Jeff. I actually fill in for the dean quite often, so just assume I'm Chinese and you'll be fine. What's interesting about tonight is that in working with Enterprise Community Partners, they had a lot of give and take. So when we told them we wanted them to come a certain date because of this reason, which is we have a housing studio, so we have a whole group of housing students or students in the housing studio, which you can come in and sit down, please, while I'm yapping right over here. Just come on in, plenty of seats. We have 80 students, and we felt it very important, I felt it very important, that this meeting and the whole Affordable Housing Design Leadership Institute would take place when the students would actually take in their housing studio. So that was very critical to us, I think. Although the dean's not here, I'd like to recognize the Associate Dean for Faculty Affairs. On the back, Gail Peter Borden. Gail is new in his position, so I think he's still trying to find out what it really means to be Associate Dean. And he's probably found out that it means 24 hours a day, 7 days a week job. And I'm sure he didn't expect it. So I'd like to really also thank Affordable Housing Design Leadership Institute for not having the keynote address on Tuesday night, but having it on a Wednesday night, which is unusual for them, because this is the regular night that we have our scheduled speakers. And we'd like to welcome both David and Andrea. So this is also kind of a joint lecture night. It's a keynote, and it's also part of the school's regular address. So thank you, Jeff, for coming, and thank you all for participating, and we're going to have a great lecture, I know.
Now, before we come to the lecture, we're very fortunate to have with us tonight Rushmore Cervantes, who is the General Manager of the Housing and Community Investment Department for the City of Los Angeles, who's going to help provide some local context and from local government for tonight's presentation. Rushmore has more than 20 years of experience at the City of Los Angeles, and he's played a number of roles over the past 5 years at the Housing Department, but he was recently nominated by the mayor and approved by a unanimous vote of the City Council to be the permanent general manager of the department. And he truly is one of the leading voices within the City of Los Angeles on behalf of affordable housing and community development. His role at the department requires him to be responsible for the promotion, development, and preservation of decent, safe, affordable housing and the expansion of economic opportunities, principally for low and moderate income people. In his Long career at the city. He has played the role of executive officer for the housing department, chief deputy controller for the city, general manager of the El Pueblo Historical Monument Authority, and assistant general manager for the Los Angeles Department of Aging. So he brings many perspectives to his current role, but one comment that Rushmore made that I very much appreciated, having been at the department for 5 years, he said that when he first came to the department, he wasn't a houser, but he is now a houser. So please join me in welcoming Rushmore Cervantes.
Well, thank you very much for that long introduction. It makes me feel old, so thank you. And for those that are visiting from out of town, welcome to Los Angeles. And for those USC students, what the hell happened in Boston College? Anyway, well, welcome, and it's a pleasure to be speaking to all of you this afternoon. We're in a unique time in the city of Los Angeles and the state of California in particular. We've had a crisis like none other as it relates to housing. We did the state requires a 8-year study to be conducted. It's called a Regional Housing Needs Assessment. Here in the city of Los Angeles over the next 8 years, just to meet the needs of Angelinos, we need to produce 83,000 units over the next 8 years. It's quite a surmountable number. In addition to that, we're a city of renters. 60% of our residents are renters, and of those, approximately 60% are rent burdened. And what that means is that they're spending at least 35% of their income on rent. In addition to that, we actually have the second largest homeless population in the county, anywhere from in the country, in the county of Los Angeles. And we have the most veteran homelessness in the entire country. So we've got an uphill battle, and this, as at the same time, we've had the elimination of the community redevelopment agencies in the state of California. Here in Los Angeles alone, they contribute $50 million a year for affordable housing. That's no longer there. Federal entitlements are down 45–50% over the last 4 years. The task is tall, but at the same time, where there's issues, there's opportunities as well. The city of Los Angeles aligned its resources by combining housing along with community investment. We've merged departments. We've merged the management of all the federal funds from HUD, which is Community Development Block Grant dollars, home dollars, emergency solution grant dollars, which are those that are for homeless services and housing, as well as housing opportunity for people with AIDS. So a lot of words, a lot of programs, but what's important about that is that we're aligning our resources to be able to leverage not only with other federal dollars, but also leveraging them with other city resources as well as private sector dollars. We recently adopted the first ever transit-oriented consolidated plan in the country, aligning all those federal funds around transit. And why is that important? Well, many of you may have heard or may not have heard, over the next 25 years, working with the County of Los Angeles, we have $40 billion to spend on rail systems here in the greater region of Los Angeles. And what that means is we're going to be constructing 42 new rail systems, new rail stations here in the city. That's a tremendous opportunity for us. And just give you an example where we're going with our development of affordable housing in particular is that we've got 31 projects in our pipeline for the next 2 years of affordable housing. 26 of those are around TOD, transit-oriented development project areas. So we're laying the groundwork for investments in targeted areas, and we're going to be coupling that with other social service resources as well as economic resources that we can have an impact in the community. So what does that mean to design? Well, it means a hell of a lot, because it's not about just building an affordable housing unit. It's about designing a structure that's going to have an impact in the community. Designing something that's going to be able to leverage or at least be able to make the community around it more accessible to others around transit, that will promote economic growth, that will promote investment of other resources, whether it be private dollars, whether it be the homeowners, the business community, or investors. The whole idea behind the design is not to be just about the structure itself. We need to think outside the box as to how we make those buildings, how we make those structures more accessible. And that's really what the bottom line is now. We're excited about the opportunity to have those resources aligned. We're excited about the new designs we're seeing. We've got issues we face all the time about particular designs. We're trying to house seniors. We're trying to house veterans. We're trying to house chronically homeless, as well as families. We need to integrate all of those thoughts, as well as adding in commercial as well. So think of it from a standpoint, when you're designing something, it's about building communities. And that's what your role is on a go-forward basis, is not designing a particular structure, it's about building communities. So look forward to the conversation tonight, and have a great evening. Thank you very much.
Sorry, there's just one more, and I'll try to be brief. We've had such a wonderful day, and so glad to be here. Thanks so much to the City of Los Angeles, to USC, to our local enterprise office. I also want to thank, we're so glad to have Eric Muschler from the McKnight Foundation, our founding partner. This institute has been going now for 5 years. We started in Minneapolis. And Eric said to me earlier today, he said, what do you think the difference is from 5 years ago to today? And we spoke about exactly this idea that 5 years ago, David was there, some others were there, we talked a lot about design excellence of the buildings that we were designing, right? We spent a lot of time talking about architectural design, landscape design at the level of the building. And today the conversation was so much broader. Of course, we all know we have to do so much more. So I'm really proud to see sort of the evolution of our industry, being able to understand the complexities of urban development and community design. The big thing I want to do tonight, though, is really do a shout out and an advertisement for one of our other programs at Enterprise, the Enterprise Rose Architectural Fellowship Program. For all of you students in the room and faculty too, we have a program in Enterprise that simply is the single best way to develop a career as an architect working in community development. What we know about architects is, yes, you need all the design skills. Yes, you need everything it takes to be an architect, and it's always taken. But the world's changing, and you need a whole different set of skills as well. You have to understand the financing complexities. You have to understand the policy complexities. You have to be a community organizer. You have to know how to really engage community to have the kind of outcomes. And you simply don't get that in a simple architectural career path. So I've asked, we have our first year Rose Fellows here tonight. I've asked 2 of them to say a brief word about their experience. So Hillary Knoll and Eric Rodriguez, yours from Los Angeles, come on up and just say a word for us.
Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing? Great. It's good to be back home. I just moved to Cleveland just 8 months ago. Just share a little bit of my story, my background. Grew up in San Fernando Valley. Was raised, really inspired. As I was kind of doing architecture, I was really inspired by just all the unique cultures within LA, and just really get to know such a diversity, and really trying to capture all of that diversity within design was a struggle, because you can't just really mimic a culture and say, this is kind of authentic within a building. And so I was really looking for a place to kind of redefine who I am as an architect, as a community member, and just as an advocate for just equity. And growing up in a neighborhood that saw a lot of struggles, I feel that there was great potential within the community. They express themselves by just being entrepreneurial and going out there and getting stuff done. And I was just really motivated by that. And so just coming in from that lens, I really just, before I could tackle anything else, I wanted to learn, how to really bring together the whole components of building, creating architecture, designing architecture that is meaningful to people, but also learning the financing and how it all kind of comes together, the complexities of working with local government and just community members. And so far, it's been great. It's been a great first 8 months in Cleveland. Definitely learning a lot from a different climate, different getting around the city. I actually went car-free, so I'm kind of, really switched up my life. Sitting on the 405 for an hour and a half was not fun. So now I got a 5-minute commute to work walking, so it's great. Thank you.
I'm Hillary Knoll. I'm a Rose Architectural Fellow up in the Bay Area. And I think, for me, like so many of us in the room, design has this possibility of symbolizing our collective human intent. But when we look around the built environment, it's very rare that we sort of see that manifested. And I entered into the field of architecture very aspirational and idealistic, probably like so many students. And after several years of working in a conventional firm, sort of found my passions being sidelined and on the margin to what felt like a day job, even though it was a great firm and everything. And the opportunity and the honor to be a Rose Fellow is a one-of-a-kind thing. I mean, this doesn't come around too often. There's really nothing else like it. It's the chance to, really tool up and change your skill set while at the same time being a designer and becoming an architect. And then ultimately to be able to sort of steer your own path, to have that control over the types of projects you want to see manifest, and come into reality. So I'd encourage anyone who has an interest in humanitarian, public interest work to check out the fellowship for sure.
So when I was a first-year Rose Fellow in 2001, there wasn't these kind of networks out there available. So I did what I sort of thought was the best thing to do, and I sought out who I thought were some of the best architects working in affordable housing in the country. So I basically tracked David Baker down and befriended him. Or is that sort of how it worked?
Okay, yes, ma'am.
This is how it works, right? So, but, we're so lucky to have such a wealth of architectural talent in the field. David has been, and increasing in ranks, and so many of them are teaching at your school. So you're so lucky about this. David's been leading in this field for maybe longer than most, in fact. He teased me, though, that I used him as bait tonight to get Andrea Cochran, who I didn't know before tonight, but maybe she'll be my new best friend if I'm lucky. I don't know. We'll see about that. But, for me, part of this idea, of course, of it's not about the building, is also the incredible importance of integrating landscape architecture and architecture. Not only those two things, but as a start. And David and Andy have formed a partnership which is truly remarkable and I think exemplary of the direction that we all need to go. So I'm so pleased to have them here tonight. Thank you.
Can we get the lights turned down? Yeah. We have control. Okay, we have control, we think. So Dave and I started working together, like we just were talking about this a long time ago. We won't say how long. So we've done a number of projects. And so what we thought we would talk about today is landscape architecture and then the larger community. And so it's different scales of work. He described my practice, which is also based in San Francisco. We're about 13 people, as a dumbbell. And we sort of work at both ends of the spectrum. We work for very poor people and extremely wealthy people, and not that much in the middle, it seems like. So, but I think that one informs the other, and that you learn from budgets that are large, to take risks and try new things, then you can apply them at the scale of something where every penny counts. So that's been a really effective model for us. So I'm just going to go through. We're going to each talk about a few slides that just describe our work, in my case, not necessarily in housing, and then just kind of give talk about design a little bit, and then focus on some projects that are relevant. This is a project for the University of California in San Francisco. It's a cardiovascular research building. I think one of the things this embodies is this sense that I like to do when whatever project that we're working on is to create this sort of mutability and the sense of movement and change and really embracing seasons, times of day. These grasses are always in movement, and thinking about sustainability as well. This entire courtyard is underlaid by an entire water detention basin. But on top, you'd never know that that was happening. And all the grasses that are lawn replacements are all native grasses. So there's just different levels that you can appreciate the work. But at the first level, I think as the design level, is that it feels really soft and welcoming and serves that community. This is the entry to that space. Our work is fairly architectural as well, and it operates at a civic scale. So this is the northern entrance to the University of California Mission Bay campus in San Francisco. We also, in that sort of architectural vein, we designed both sides of this gateway. So this is a fence that actually functions as a piece of architecture that hides a temporary power plant that will be replaced by a lab building in the future. So the architecture becomes this 8-foot-tall permeable fence with bamboo behind it, so it has a strong presence that is strong enough to hold that other side of that entry gateway. For a private school in the Bay Area, sustainability and teaching by doing was really important. And so the story of water, as the water leaves the roof, comes under here. The kids can run across it. It goes through and goes into a bioswale. And all of the wood that we used on the project, both in these screens, which kind of have this sense of design-wise creating a front porch, or a carpet, is actually harvested from the site. So the Monterey cypress trees that we had to take down in the parking lot that before the project started were actually used in the project, and that became the story. So telling stories through the landscape is also a really important part of what we do, and that comes from knowing the community that we're working with. Also, this is at UC Berkeley. This is a bio-research lab for biofuels, and so the idea of the Corten steel walls have holes in them that actually are the molecules that they use inside the building. So the story of what's happening inside is happening outside. But the other thing that's about this is an 11-foot grade change from entry to building is about, in landscape, it's not just about a space and how you feel in the space, but often landscapes are experienced by moving through them. So how do you make that experience really interesting and engaging? And then finally, at sort of a larger scale, when we think about landscape, we think about the designed landscape here on this plinth in a floodplain, and how it relates to the larger landscape. So making these connections that create seamless transitions between architecture, landscape, and the larger environment that cause people to really look at the larger environment and think about it in new ways. And then to a really intimate scaled space, this was H2 Hotel that David and I worked on together, where the rooms actually open out onto little terraces off the rooms. And David will talk a little bit now.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. It's been a real privilege to work with you for this short time. We left out the really old project because the colors were changing in the film. This is that hotel on the outside, and it's part of our notion. I hate to use the word engagement because Liz had crossed out engagement and put inclusion. I don't know if this is too inclusionary, though, but maybe. This is in Healdsburg, and this is actually, we proposed this idea of that the place just opened up to the regular old street, and I kind of crossed my fingers and hoped it would work. And then it does. It's really wonderful and become quite a community center for the local community. So not only is it a spiffy hotel, but it's a place that it integrates the tourists and the locals. This is a net zero, actually net positive certified LEED platinum passive house that's in my backyard that we just finished. It was an experimental project, really, really fun project. We tried out everything because if it failed, I couldn't sue myself. Yeah, that's true. So this is Folsom. This was actually a first LEED certified new building in San Francisco. Andy and I worked on this. It was a groundbreaking in many ways, one of which was to do a mixed income from 60% of median income down to 0. So it goes from basically almost market rate, close to market rate, and down to formerly homeless. And they're all in there together, and people say, well, this will never work. It turned out to be really a good strategy, actually, because everybody sort of mellows each other out, and it's self-selecting. You know that there's going to be formerly homeless people. This is a senior project in the Bayview. We do quite a bit of work down there. And this is another project, formerly homeless families in the Bayview that we just finished. It has a really nice urban agriculture scheme that where they have some of the folks in there coordinating a real community garden that they, instead of allotment garden, they're growing vegetables together. And this is a transit-oriented development in Sacramento called La Valentina, quite a fun project in the Alkali Flats neighborhood. And so this is what we've done for a long time, is do buildings and more districts or places. I think a building can be a place, but it's really fun to work on bigger things. But we're going to start with a building scale project, and Andy, feel free to chime in. I think this is our breakout project, because this was done and in the Tenderloin, and it's which was kind of a crazy idea. So it's formerly homeless. About five years ago, I checked in, and the average family income in this building was $12,000. So really, really, really low income. TNDC, which is a wonderful organization founded by Franciscans. And it's really great to go someplace where people say, yeah, parking, why do you have parking in there? I used to be the only guy saying that, and people, they got a little tired. They just kind of like, would you shut up about the parking? But so here they said, well, we're going to put a really big parking garage, and we're going to charge people working downtown for it, and it's going to support the building. And we said, well, let's get an estimate on that. And it was like $70,000 a space. And I said, well, how much are you going to rent them for? And he said, well, I think we can get $200, $150. And well, okay, then you're going to get the other $500 to pay off the $70,000 from where? And they went, really? It doesn't make money? And I go, well, if you have a commodity that's free, you can't charge a lot for it. So people are used to free, and so they don't really want to pay the value. So anyway, this is in the Tenderloin. It's a building that is contextual, but modern. It's a historic district. Did this thing of it's a kind of a squatty building, so we sort of slimmed it up by doing these vertical cuts. Of course, there was a setback requirement, and the planning department said, well, instead of setting back, how about if we cut a notch? And they went, oh, okay, I guess you can do that. And then we did our own graffiti before the fact, which worked pretty well. I mean, and actually, I went by here once, and there were little stars, like they put on kindergarten kids' foreheads, on the points of that big asterisk, and somebody had put those on. But it really hasn't been tagged, which is it's an interesting thing. It's not like if you do something you really care about that's wonderful, that somebody won't vandalize it, but they vandalize it less, I would say. And then this shows how tight and I guess crammed in is the word I want. One of the things that's nice here is, I think the battery died on this guy. Okay, so that this would have been the driveway down into the parking garage, so that you wouldn't have had this retail space, you wouldn't have had that unit, and this also allowed this passage through. We convinced the fire department that is a corridor, which they believed. So this is the sketch of the corridor, and rubber dubber, and then that's the real corridor leading out to the back, where we did this glass garage door to the back courtyard, and maybe you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, one of the things about this that, this sort of, again, I mean, we live in California, and it's inside outside, and this big door can open and they can have events and people can spill out, but this sort of architecture, the architectural move of the colored concrete path, the corridor runs out into the landscape. And one of the things that's been really great about working with David over the years is that he's actually, because he values what landscape adds to the entire project, that he's actually taken stuff out of the building to put it into the landscape, so the whole project benefits from it. And it's really made it wonderful for us, because when we're working like that and everybody's working as a team for the betterment of the project, it's not like the landscape just got added in like lettuce at the end, and it's all integrated.
Yeah, it used to be when we started out that they would go, oh, we got to save $500,000. Well, how much is the landscape budget? Yeah, things have actually progressed, because that was like the first reaction when we started out.
Want to go to let's go to the next slide.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is looking out on the landscape, and you can see that it really forms. I mean, this green wall of bamboo actually gives a sense of. It really makes the interior feel like you're outside. I mean, one of the things about this neighborhood in the Tenderloin is there are drug deals going on the street, and when we went there with the photographer to take photos, I mean, it's a very predatory environment. There's a lot of screaming, and it's very loud. And then you come into this, I think you called that the entry, or like the decompression zone.
Feng Shui compliance.
And then you walk through, and then you come to this garden, and you open up the door, and you go outside. And let's go to the next one. And, you want to talk about this one?
That's the food bank delivery in front of the door. Yes, every week.
And then you come outside, and there's actually a space, and it's a very contemplative space. And there are kids in the building, and there are playgrounds in the neighborhood, so there aren't playgrounds here. But all the units open, or most of the units open out onto this U-shaped space. And this fountain was something that David really thought we should have a fountain, and I said, David, that's crazy. We don't, who's going to take care of it? What if it breaks down? And it's been amazingly successful, and so we designed it so there's only a 1/4 inch of water over the whole thing. It reflects the sun. It brings light. You can't kill yourself on it, and people. But what it does is when you walk in there, there's maybe 30 lineal feet of water spilling off that edge, and it's like your blood pressure goes completely down. It's a complete sanctuary.
And then here's the unit plan, which is really what's left after you do all the zoning and building code setbacks. And this is actually a completely furnished apartment, a resident, so this is not a model unit. This is what happens when you move from an 80 square foot SRO into your 1-bedroom apartment, and you bring your altar with you. This was one of the first buildings where we TNDC was great, and we said, well, you should do a roof deck and do agriculture on the roof, and they said, well, we'll have to talk to our building management people about that. And then we just kind of said, well, if it really doesn't work, you can throw them away, or you can plant lavender in them. And we put these out there, and it was really a fantastic learning experience. This guy, he's from Mexico, and I was in his apartment. He had a bowl of beans that he'd grown that were from his village. That you couldn't. It was a native bean to his village, and so it wasn't like he was feeding his family, but it was a tremendous. Yeah. Well,
when I went up there, we took these photos. He was out there, he was doing his laundry. I think it was brilliant of David. The laundry is right next to the garden. The garden becomes a place where people meet and talk to their neighbors. And they do a lottery system where they actually allow, someone has half a horse trough. But I think two things about this space are really interesting. One is they don't have the budget to maintain it. And as David said, it almost didn't get added till the last minute. And so it's just they found a little bit of money at the end. They added it. They don't. It's totally maintained by the people, the residents of the building, so they don't have to pay for maintenance. And it's probably the lushest and most beautiful space. I mean, people really, because they want. And this guy said to me when we was there that getting his hands in that dirt was like therapy for him. So, I mean, it really.
Yeah. Well, quite wonderful. And they came back to us a few years later and said, well, we've hired a garden coordinator, and can we put more troughs on the roof? And we said, sure, it's a concrete building. And so they've doubled the size of it, and they have about 2,500 units, and they've put shared gardens on all their buildings. It's interesting. So it worked. So let's go to district scale, and this is going to be Andy's section here.
Okay. Let me get that. So I won a competition to do a park in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we don't normally do competitions because usually we work with people and clients, and it's hard for me to come up with an idea if I'm not part of a discussion, a dialogue with the client. But anyway, this is a very, very special client, and we won this competition. But the whole thing started with the Pittsburgh Children's Museum, which is here. It was designed by Koenig Eisenberg. They won a competition to design that building. And this was part of this initiative that they started as being sort of, they really are embedded in the North Side community, which they called the Charm Bracelet, which was an initiative to connect various cultural institutions and make a better place for children on the north side of Pittsburgh and families. So this is the building that Koenig Eisenberg designed. This was the first of that. And then they had other connections with the community which really started to build community. This is downtown Pittsburgh. The gateways to the community are really depressing underpasses. They collaborated with artists to create really wonderful lit underpass, art. They connected to the various cultural institutions to really improve the north side, one little project at a time. This is the location of the park, and this is downtown Pittsburgh. It was laid out in the late 1700s with this park was the civic center, surrounded by the civic buildings and a green space. So it was had a lot of foresight in planning. This is taken the early part of the last century, where one of the first Carnegie libraries was there. This was the place, and it was a really vibrant place in the community. And then in the 1950s, the Market Hall, and then in the 1960s, they just took it all down and they built this. They had a competition and they built this. This is the award-winning entry of that competition, which, 30 years later had fallen into disrepair, and there's the library and the urban renewal. And so they completely eviscerated this active community. One of the things they did first was think about how they could reconnect the community back into downtown Pittsburgh. And they hired Doug Sussman from Los Angeles to work on a plan. And he looked at sort of making really big urban design moves for the 20-year plan to kind of think about how this community could be reconnected. So our plan was to design this space and then also to create, to enhance those connections for the future. So this was the drawings that we did for this, children's park. This was owned by the city, but the Children's Museum took over this park and then returned it to the city at the end. They raised $6 million for this. So this was the design. It was about light. We worked with Ned Kahn, an artist who does a lot of ephemeral and celebrating of ephemeral art, and wind, and so these were the drawings that we won the competition, and it was a community group that judged it, and along with architects and landscape architects in the museum, and in the end they said, great, you won the design, but now the work starts, which for me was great because it's like you don't really know. I mean, you just can't come in and impose a design on someone. So they actually ended up hating the design, the community, because they said it was not the front yard of the Children's Museum. It was an important and historic civic space, and it needed to be a civic space. And so everybody got that wrong. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and, community meetings with kids making models, people making drawings, and some people really liked that Victorian idea, and they would have been very happy to put, the Victorian design right back. But that doesn't work for the way we use things today. And so what we needed to do was come up with a design that actually addressed both. So this was the design that was sort of based on that Victorian design, but actually worked for the future, which is a lot more green space. bioswales, Ned's art piece, which is totally integrated with the park, a big lawn for events, and enough space to have tents and fairs and things like that. We had apartments, built in the 60s overlooking, and a very ugly office building that would remain. So sometimes I wish I had more jobs like with you. I actually could put the building in the photos. Yeah. Anyway, so this is a plan which was taken from the roof later. This is Ned's art piece, and what it is he calls it inarticulated cloud or cloud arbor. And every few minutes, it becomes a cloud, and then it sort of blows all over the museum. It really kind of activates the park. This features all kinds of sustainable features, like, for instance, this lawn is with clover, so it doesn't need to be mowed or watered as much. This is looking back at the museum. This is, using the local bluestone, was, trying to create craft that was a little tactile, that made people feel like they wanted to be in it, and then you can see the clover. Opening up the corners so that people felt good and safe walking in. The problem before with the park was it was depressed 14 feet. There were homeless people living under the overhangs. Now this is raised up. You can see across it. It's safe. So people come and because it feels safe. This is the bioswale, which is filled with flowers and color, and people come and can enjoy that. They have events there. This is one of the events that the Children's Museum sponsors and creates. They have concerts. So there's a programming element to this that's very important, as well as they have raised the money for the maintenance for the park. One of the fairs. People coming for lunch all day long, the bioswale. Evening comes, people start walking their dogs. It has a different times of day where it has different activities. In the evening, people feel safe hanging out there. At night, they use it for, throwing frisbees and balls, and then people can walk to the theater. One of the parts of the charm place, it is a theater, so that this becomes an important passageway that feels safe at all times. And what's interesting too is that the whole thing is filled with temporary chairs, kind of like Bryant Park idea. The Children's Museum bought them. In the 2 years that since it's been completed, they haven't lost one single chair, because the community, the people in the apartments, it's like eyes on the street. They're watching it, calling the police. If it's just wonderful to see something that's working so well.
Yeah, you're in a place that people care about when you walk there and somebody comes up to you and go, "Can I help you?" You're like, it's an interesting thing, politely. And actually that happened here to me at Casa Franca. Casa Franca was a public housing. It was actually named after a naval battle in the Philippines that the United States lost, and it was a memorial to 3,500 sailors who died. It's an interesting issue is it's on this, this is industrial land, and this is housing. And so there was it was a controversy of what do you do in that situation. This was the existing housing. It's really great working in these areas, because the people were so happy to be paid attention to and to see us, and it's so awful. This is when we were doing the community process, and we unrolled some drawings in a woman's house, and a cockroach ran across the drawings, and she said, "Look at when are you going to start? You heard what I said. We want you to do this." So this was the situation with, there was a kind of a decrepit park. There's a community center, nice community center. The city had up here built a school and a library. There was an abandoned pasta factory that was used for manufacturing methamphetamine. There was one gate into this that had one way in, one way out. And then so we did, this was our new urbanist moment. We connected all the streets through. It's very interesting. One of the things we did here is that some of the streets we own, so we got to number it and call it, to do our parking requirement with street parking. And then the city stepped up and fixed the park. and I'll take you through the various parts. So, and then we were talking to the housing authority, and we said, well, do you want to do, LEED, right? And they went, well, how much does it cost? And we go, well, not very much. We'll help you out. There was a pilot program for LEED ND, so this became the first LEED ND certified plan in Northern California. Got to gold, and then there's a synergy there. So everything is at LEED Platinum. And I know you don't really have to. I'm going to just say, it's kind of like the GEDs. If you go, LEED isn't important, I didn't have to do it, and it's like kind of saying, I really didn't have to get my degree from high school. All I can say is it is actually harder to do it. And I think it's a worthwhile thing. Did lots of stuff, like managed all the stormwater on the site, including the streets. And I think that's what's really fun about doing a district is, and this was, Oakland is kind of back on its heels, so the public works people went, yeah, there's two of us, whatever you want to do, you have to pay for the maintenance, go away. And which was nice, so that we got to do the active stormwater. We did a density. We broke it up. There are other schemes that were actually competing schemes where they just put townhouses that were around parking lots, interestingly enough. So we got enough density down here in this building to get a lot of the density and actually deal with structured parking. These units here with their accessible porches where people actually hang out, it hides the parking garage. So there's the parking garage, and and then there's these units hiding it with paths. So when we rewove the grid, we either put pedestrian paths or streets. So this is why freeing the parking up by putting it on the streets and in this structure, we had no parking lots, and so we had these smaller green spaces like this one, which is the commons, and we did a speed table, and we threw that out there expecting everybody to go, what is that? Get rid of it. That's going to be too expensive. And the housing authority, everybody went, well, it's great. Could you put a door in it so it's more, open? And we said, okay. So that's a lesson for architecture students is, don't edit yourself before you show it to people. You'll be amazed at what people will catch on to and really love that you think, wow, I could never get anybody to agree to do this. And it suddenly becomes something so this is inside that space. We always try to make our stairs, make it easier to walk up than to take the elevator. And then you get up to this level, and it's a very conventional, apartment building, but with corridors. We have the anti-Las Vegas notion where you can't stand anywhere in this corridor without seeing daylight, without seeing a window. As opposed to, you go to Las Vegas, and when you're in a hotel, you can never see any daylight. Yeah, so it's different. So this was and Andy did not choose the play equipment. Andy didn't do this one. This is why I like to work with Andy, because she would never have chosen those colors. There's a little theme here. We're a little bit, perhaps we try to be elegant. So this is as that grew in, that space. And then we had all these townhouses, very dense. They don't have backs. Actually, a writer was saying, what style do you call this? And so it's like a third world modern. And but it's a very funky neighborhood. And if you do something really beautiful and sort of sleek, it just would, so anyway, and then a very diverse community. There's crime has gone down. There's only been one. There's only been one shooting, and that was it was a funeral across the street where the other side showed up and chased some guy onto the site and executed him. But that's been our one. It's a rough neighborhood, but it's you go in there. It's quite wonderful and calming, and by taming. I think taming the streets is really a huge thing, because that public space, your sidewalks, even your streets, you can stand on those streets and you don't feel like you're going to get run over. And that's an interesting thing. When people feel comfortable to stand on the street, you've won, because streets, as well as sidewalks, but even streets are public open space, and they should feel safe. And if you make them narrow enough and with enough bumps, they are safe. This is a woman who actually, her high school teacher was a partner of one of the women taught in my, who works at my office, and so she did an internship, and she's 15. She's like the best intern we've ever had. No disrespect to college interns, but she is so motivated and so articulate and just wonderful. This is that park. It was very interesting. The city, they said, this is great. By the way, we're putting a 12-foot fence up here with razor wire on the top. And we said, what are we doing that for? And they went, well, you know, that's our standard. And it's Oakland, you know, because so anyway, so we finally, this was one of our victories. This is life is little victories. I'm a kind of in the weeds guy. We got him to like a 6-foot fence with no razor wire, and so happy about that. And then this is more of these houses. So this is a townhouse. It's a pinwheel townhouse. There are a lot of 4- and 5-bedroom units here. And the pedestrian paths get really used. A lot of kids. There's, you know, this is like stormwater delay boxes can be nice looking. You don't have to give up on that. And then we got Habitat Humanity showed up, and they said, so the Housing Authority was great. They said, well, we want to involve Habitat. And Habitat said, could you please give us this site here, and we can put a 12-foot fence with razor wire there between us and the public housing. And I said, wait, come on, you guys are liberals. You don't really mean that. And how about we integrate you in, you know, well, and they went, oh, well, so how about 2 sites? Oops, and then they said, okay, we can do that. You've guilted us into it. And I said, we'll set it up so if you want to fence it and make it a little Fort Apache, you can if there's a problem, but maybe there won't be a problem. And it turns out there is, and Habitat's it worked out for them. They did 22 units. They phased it. This became an IDP project, an intern development program project. I let the young folks in the office who get insulated from the clients handle Habitat, and boy, that was a learning experience for them. Because Habitat, I don't know if anybody here has worked with Habitat, and they're one tough client. And you know, this was I was practically, I gloated because first thing Habitat did is they said, you know, that's a lot more work. So just make that one big shed. And students are like, what? It's just a little step. It's making it interesting. And they're like, out of there. So then we did the working drawings for them, and you know, they built the Habitat works at 500 hours of sweat equity. There were families in there that did their hours and then helped other families, and they're quite integrated in the community. And then we had this pasta factory. Instead of tearing it down and making townhouses, we said, hey, let's do artist lofts. And so we kept doing that, and finally Bridget from the Housing Authority goes, you know, there is no financing for artists, David, so we got to do something else. But there's financing for people living with AIDS. So this became families with one person, you know, and don't tell anybody in Oakland I said that because they're quite sensitive. So families living with somebody who has a disease. And then we had a little medical clinic, and that's getting expanded to a 40-hour-a-week operation under, you know, the new medical stuff. So really, really great. We had this was done during the recession. I'd love to take credit for this thing being under budget, but you know, it was just that everybody was broke except we had some money. So we had extra money to. These guys came to the opening, the Alito brothers. Yeah, because they closed it in the 80s, but they're still around. And then this was interesting because this is going to be our solar. We're going to put some solar up there, you know, make the big architect's expression. And the Housing Authority went, you know, that really looks like a Target. And we just don't want to be repairing solar panels after they've been shot. So, but we had it in the budget, so we put a big solar system on the roof. It wouldn't have fit there. And we said, well, it makes a great entry canopy. So that's what it became, and it's sort of, you know, it's the entry to that. And then the final story here, which I think is really interesting, is there's a woman who, she grew up in the neighborhood. Her mother wouldn't let her go play in the park because there were a bunch of kids who were not good kids doing things that were not good, and so selling drugs. And so she came back after coming out of the military and said, you know, I want to do acta non verba as deeds, not words. And so she said, I want to do something. She's really quite incredible. And so she went and said, I'm going to do a garden here. I'm going to do my urban garden. And she went to the Housing Authority and said, can I have permission? And Bridget said, listen, just don't tell anybody. Just go down there and do it, because if Park and Rec here, we're involved, they're just going to hit us up for $200,000, and they will. There's no way they will not let you do this garden. So really interesting. She has the local school kids, so they can now walk to the school because we connected. It used to be like a 5-block walk. They sell the vegetables. It's a big operation. She did a bank account for each kid. They put the money they make selling the vegetables in their bank account, because she said, well, if they have a bank account, they are much more likely to go to college. And anyway, so Kelly Carlisle, she's had lunch with Michelle Obama now, and yeah, she's great. And then this guy actually did come up to me and go, "Can I help you?" I was out there showing some journalist that garden, and he goes, "Can I help you?" And he did it in this great way, which was like, "You're not messing with anything." And so you get this great involvement. There's the seniors, some of the seniors. It's a diverse community. They do Tai Chi out there. Really, really quite wonderful. Okay, and then this is our last project. This is Andy and I did Richardson. But this is interesting. This is a district in San Francisco. I won't take credit for this. Well, this was a huge community effort. There was this Central Freeway that, as part of the golden era of driving faster places and destroying places, was there, and it got really damaged in the earthquake, and then the planning department was going to tear it down, and the people who lived down here about 4 miles away did a voter initiative and got it. Said, you can't tear it down because we want to drive home on a freeway. And then the neighbors went, wait a second, we don't like that freeway. And they did an initiative. So after about 4 initiatives going back and forth, you see it here, just really, and those things are amazing. Not only are they really poisonous, but they actually are bad for property values as well. So this is actually, you'll see this view from the other direction. This is a view. This is the City Arts Garage, and they're tearing down the freeway. It created, I think, 13 sites. And so these are some of the sites, and these are the ones we've done. And one of the things they did a competition for many of the sites, and they favored the architects who won. So Stanley Sadowitz is doing one, and Fujiran's doing a couple. Owen Kennerly, who's a fantastic younger architect in San Francisco, great housing and architect, wonderfully talented. So they have really good architect development teams doing really good buildings. So I'll just go through these quickly. So what's interesting about this was the integration of the market rate. So this is market rate sold out instantly for $1,200 a square foot building, and this is the retail on the base. This guy runs this is his casual bistro, because he has a restaurant where it's the wine flight is $165 and the dinner is $200, and so this place doesn't cost you that much, and you can get a hamburger for $18. Really good hamburger, I gotta say. And then this was actually a good thing. There was a question about alleys today in East LA, and it's different here, but in Hayes Valley, they just basically said on the alleys you can only be 40 foot high. And, it really is better than having 65 foot high buildings on alleys. I mean, it's kind of painful for the developer. What was also painful is there's inclusionary housing here. So these 4 townhouses each sold for $1.3 million. They're now worth about $1.8 million. And this one sold for $295,000 to a very lucky income qualified person. I don't know if I'm totally think that's a good thing, because I got it sort of like, that $1 million we could have built formerly homeless. People, they don't have their legs amputated and stuff. Whereas I don't know. I think there's more need at the bottom, but it's good. But there's also I have mixed feelings about that. Anyway, so then now we're doing another project. This is in the zoning phase, or actually in construction, and it's luxury micro units. So it's we're doing 325 square foot luxury apartments. Yeah, and it was going to be rental, and actually it has 20%, 40% 2 bedrooms. So the 2 bedrooms are 750 square feet. They're nice, but And the developers went, well, you know what? I think we're going to go condo. It's like the Haas family. And I said, it's kind of hard because 300 square foot units, there's not a proven market. And so they asked the real estate guru, and he said, build it as fast as you can, because there's a superheated market in San Francisco now. So it's the multiplier good here. This Richardson multiplier good. So this is a parking lot across the street from that. And this is a project Andy and I did a few years back, just recently completed. It's formerly homeless. So you have the luxury micro units, the luxury larger units with the $1 million townhouses, and then kitty corner to it you have formerly homeless with everybody pays something, but these people are coming out of the Department of Public Health. And they're trying to really address the chronic homeless people, which it got written up in the New York Times, which was fun. Michael Kimmelman, don't ever Google Michael Kimmelman if you're going to talk to him, because he's like the chief critic of the New York Times, and he's a touring concert pianist. I'm like, cup of coffee. Oh my God, I got to talk to this guy. Very nice guy. This is actually an interesting thing, and I think we're doing pretty good on time. I don't know if people aren't. We didn't start. Yeah, so people aren't squirming too much. So the property manager of this is called Community Housing Partners. He said, "Yeah, I was driving by. I was riding my bike by, and somebody opened the door of the transformer room and closed it and walked away. And I thought, how can that be? You're not supposed to go in the transformer room." And he went in there. And there were 8 people living in the transformer room, and they had like lights and couches and beds, and they didn't have a bathroom, but you think, well, there's a story there. I mean, people are very ingenious, and it was a lot better than living on the street. They had it set up pretty nice. They couldn't let them stay there. The PG&E not particularly happy about that notion of people living on the transformer. But I thought it was interesting. Here we're formerly homeless, and then sun shading, and I guess I really like this picture because I think you look at the shadow of the sunshade. It's like, my God, it works. And then we broke it up. So we did retail. One of the things I think that happens with retail kind of gets a bad name because there's this thing where you're coming into a new area, you put the retail in, you don't really know what to do with it. There's maybe some zoning hurdles to opening it, and it sits there and it hasn't cooked yet, and then so people try not to do it. But I think I encourage. It's really important to have active ground level, and those retail spaces work really well. This building is the building now with a mural on it, where that picture was taken of the giant bulldozer tearing down the freeway. So that was there. So this is Andy's incredibly elegant streetscape, which one of my favorite. You can see the tree post over there. Anyway, really beautiful.
Indestructible tree guards.
Yeah, indestructible tree guards. So this space, 450 square foot. Mercy was a partner at CHP. They have a retail management group, mainly one nun, and she's really great. And she gets local businesses. This is a guy who's a Vietnamese immigrant. Opened a sandwich shop there, very successful. This was his $5 design upgrade, really nicely done. He did it himself. And that was a bona fide traffic sewer out there. That's Gough Street. It's just horrible. And people sit out there and eat their spring rolls. And then this is a formerly homeless work training program with a liquor license that where they do pizza and bread and coffee, quite successful. And we didn't do this interior, but it's quite nice. If we did it again, I never realized anybody would sit on Gough Street. So if we did it again, we would make that open. So this is the courtyard and the front door. Worked a long time with a guy named Paco Prieto who does this wonderful wood. This is sustainable urban salvage elm. And one of the things that worked really well is this courtyard is really beautiful. It's really biophilic, and you can see it from all over the place. And it's really good for the operations of the building too, because it's not a warren. This is our program. These are disabled, they're mentally disabled artists. And this woman does carrots. Those are carrots like Bugs Bunny carrots. And so those are different carrots. And she did a whole group of pieces, bunch of pieces for. And Andy, do you want to talk about that? Well, we can go through and do the courtyard. I'll keep going. So anyway, this is looking from the lobby out into the courtyard. You know, it has things like an airlock. I don't know if you know what affordable housing. People are under stress, so they have an airlock so people can't run screaming in. And the people manning the desk is always the CH people. She's a formerly homeless person, and you don't get through. All I can say, they're much tougher than they would be if they hadn't. And maybe you want to say a little bit about this courtyard.
The courtyard is the centerpiece of the entire ground floor. Opens out to the courtyard. There's treatment rooms for therapy on the other side, and David's designed it so that there's a scrim, so it's permeable to the inside, but it's a nice. You can still see through to the green, and there's these palm trees are in there because they're tall, and you can get them for less money and get really big trees in there. And so the idea was to get some green up high and to sort of mitigate the height and create a ceiling in the space. And also the whole wall to the left opens out to the outside, so everything in here is a custom design. So you can see it's really a narrow, tall space, and it really becomes another outdoor room that opens to the inside. And the other thing about it is we wanted to get this project as sustainable as possible without getting LEED because it was too expensive. So the stormwater retention became a really important part of the design. The entire paving system is permeable. We created our own unique permeable paving system by finding some spacers that we could use a regular paving system and make it become permeable. So it was actually a beautiful paving system. And then so the entire thing was really about sustainability as well as creating usable space. So that whole space opens up to the outside. And then I think what's interesting, too, is we'd gone, before while we were working on the design, we visited some other housing projects for formerly homeless people, and we were told that anything we designed had to be incredibly durable, that, and we saw some of the damage that had happened in some of these buildings. So I think if you give people really beautiful things, they'll keep it. But even still, we designed everything so those are salvage pieces of Monterey cypress that are 10 inches thick, so that even if you carve your name in it, it's still a functioning bench. I'm a big believer that you should use wood in spaces that are, especially in a climate like San Francisco where it's cold all the time, that you can sit there and be comfortable, and metal or concrete just kind of suck all the warmth out of your body. And so really durable concrete, recycled materials, all in a way that it took a lot of time for us as designers, but in the end it didn't cost anything more than what it would have to get off-the-shelf furniture.
This is the medical clinic looking through that scrim, and actually I don't know if anybody can see what that is. If you look at it, it's actually a super blown up macro view of the mosaic on the garage. And if you look at it, you can see the joints, maybe. Anyhow, but it works quite well. We're trying to encourage. If we put blinds in there, you get that blind effect, where they pull the blinds and then the umbrella and the old paper cup fall down between. And it's a feeling of deadness. Whereas this gives you privacy and separation, but it still has some transparency. And she's actually visiting her brother who had done a methamphetamine delivery, got off the plane, got arrested, gone to jail, come out, become homeless. He was a Yankees fan. One of the things we do is a lot, and is do and actually that hotel, it's one of our kit of parts is to do an exterior stair or a green stair or a stair that's, because, so often the stairs are, the contractor, you say, well, we want to paint the stair. And they go, why do you want to paint the stair? It's an emergency stair that's really ugly. People are going to take the elevator. It's sort of a non-space. And so this stair allows people to go up and down. People use it. This is going up. They socialize on that deck. And you can look down into the courtyard. That's the mosaic. So it's a picture of that mosaic that's became that vinyl. And then this was interesting. This happened because of an open space requirement. So we needed open space on the roof because we had so many units. The open space was per unit because they're really tiny. They're 315 square feet. So we did a roof garden, agriculture, green roof. And then I told this earlier, but we're touring the building, and the reporter says, "Well, has anybody gotten healthier?" And the building manager goes, "There's two people walking. They were in wheelchairs." And you go, "Whoa!" Because, well, they're not sleeping on the street. They're taking their meds. They're getting physical therapy, and you do that, and you start walking. It's not actually a miracle. Well, it is kind of a miracle, but it's not like. I have mixed feelings about green roofs. Talk to me about that later. Well, I just think they're, okay, we're not going to be naked. So this with great effort, we made all these units like within 5%, within 5 square feet, because we don't want to have any units different in size because people will be jealous. And then they said, and we don't want to have corner windows. So, come on, it's a corner unit. You got to have units on 2 sides, So, and then that's the daylighting, the corridor theory. And this is what the units look like, very simple. They're micro unit. I think micro unit is the correct name. It's not really an SRO. This is the corner unit with the nice window into the bathroom. And it comes with this furniture. They get a frying pan. Is it really interesting touring the units? Because a lot of folks, you get them off the street, and it turns out they were artists. There was a guy actually next door to this, and he had his little espresso machine. He had his NASCAR car collection. He was doing that. So what did you do? Well, yeah, I was a methamphetamine dealer. I abused my family. I went to jail. I got out. I was homeless. And what are you doing now? Well, I'm going to be I'm getting my degree in violence therapy and violence and drug abuse therapy. And he's like, "Do you want another coffee?" He's like, he was drinking a lot of coffee. I don't know. That had anything to do. And so it comes with some furniture, relatively. And then the other thing, what I didn't say is that this is locally made. You can get a lot of stuff locally made. By the time you get stuff from China and you get the markup, you get real crap for about the same price as you can build something locally. So I would advise people to search around a little bit. LA even better than the Bay Area. There's a lot of local products, and they're really in the same price range. Then this is something a Rose Fellow put together for the Enterprise Foundation, a study of the building, of the impacts. And one of the, I think this is the important sheet, because what they're saying, the notion here, which I think is true, is that you got a lot of these folks are on the street. They're using $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 of emergency services a month. I mean, the people who are really, because they're getting their leg amputated in the emergency room after they get gangrene, stuff. I mean, that's really true. That costs. San Francisco basically has universal health care. We're kind of like Sweden and got lost in the United States. But so we do all that stuff. And when you house people, they get healthier, and it's much, much, much cheaper. A lot of folks they're hospitalized in the psychiatric ward in a clinical situation, which is $1,000 a day in a clinical situation, and they can walk downstairs, they can have their appointment with their psychiatrist, their pharmacologist, get their meds. They're much more likely to take their meds if they don't have to take a bus to a hospital on the other side of town, so that it saves money. That's the bottom line, is that this type of housing saves money over you could just let them die on the street. And that's, I think, been a solution. That's the old-fashioned way of doing it. we're more humane. This is just finishing up with this great program that they got together with the animal shelter, and they did. So these are dogs that are uncivilized, so nobody will adopt them. So they're homeless dogs, and they paired them with homeless folks. There was a little stipend. They civilized the dog, and I got the dogs that wouldn't go to the bathroom inside, and wouldn't bite you, and show the dog some love. And so this whole program, graduation, really fantastic program, good for the dogs and good for the people. And it'd be good to do more stuff like that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Not too bad. Sure. So you can start. I've always told you, wait a long time, and somebody will eventually ask, or you have a shill. Yes. Well, I'll start out with the team. The team you assemble. That's totally key. And I think sometimes architects have the Howard Rourke syndrome, and they think, well, I can design lighting, I can design the fork. Who needs a land? Will you pick the plants, please, lady? So it's good to get over that and have people who are super talented. The great thing about working with Andy or a good structural engineer is instead of going, oh my God, what is that you've done? You go, oh, that's great. Next question. It's like, or you have a little bit of it's really, you're working well together when you do a little give and take, and it's better, and nobody's offended, and nobody's clinging to their ideas, good or bad, So that's good. In terms of sustainability, all these projects they're LEED something. They have, San Francisco has its own green code. The reason that Richardson isn't LEED is because redevelopment was doing that, and they, LEED has. Here's a big problem with LEED. They have that if you smoke, you can't be LEED certified. Well, the thing is, when you're doing formerly homeless housing, the least problem these folks have is smoking. It's like, we'll work on the smoking after we get over, the psychosis or whatever. It's like you work on the important stuff first. And so they got nailed, and they spent like $500,000 putting in a mechanical ventilation system because people were smoking in the garden. They said, no more LEED ever. So that was interesting. But I think that a lot of that is baked in. I think there's a good attitude about sustainability. And we got to, sometimes we have to remind ourselves that global warming and carbon neutral was not last year's issue. And we're not moving on to something else, because that's fun. That this is a 50-year lift or a 100-year lift. And that's hard for people because we have like a 6-month memory, I think. Maybe it's 9 months. It's not very long. So, yeah, so it's great. Then the team is everything. Work with adults.
Yeah, how does that incorporate into how you divvy up the money?
Oh, well, Annie doesn't get enough, so she gets more than anybody else. Any other landscape architect. I'm going to embarrass her. Okay. Can I tell that story? Okay, I can't tell the story. Sorry.
Next
It's good. Next question. Yes, Heather. Uh-huh.
Well, I think we don't have to have lawns everywhere, and and even where we need lawns, we've actually, like in universities and campuses, we've been moving towards native grasses that are actually indigenous to California, and you can water them and they look better when they're watered, but if you had a drought and you didn't water them for 2 years, they'd come back. So, but there's a whole structuring you have to do with, that kind of landscape requires a different kind of maintenance, and bringing the maintenance people up to the level of, when you mow that back, you do it at critical times of the year. There's a big learning curve there. We've also been using irrigation systems that from Australia. Australia knows drought, and so we've been actually using a lot of Australian natives that are really drought tolerant and look good all the time in some of the projects. And then also a system of irrigation called KISS, which is a subsurface drainage system that's a capillary action. So there's lots of ways, but I think really, I don't think everything has to look green. And I think it's sort of reinventing the paradigm of what we see, and that, if you're in Spain, you're in decomposed granite and trees, and you've got shade, and there's little pockets of green, but it's not like a green landscape.
Yes. No, I think you can see we're both quite technically oriented. I think we're like weeds people. It's really hard for me to get up above, dual flow toilet level. But so we find that really interesting, and I think that's the key, that these buildings really do work. That's our goal, is to have them really be solid and actually not just look good in pictures. How's that sound?
I think a lot of it is, if you keep building things, you build a lot of your work. Every time you build something, you learn something. And if you've got a goal, you make it better every time. And most of our work's built, and I think all David's work's built. I mean, I think just about everything is built. So
you want to go back in 10 years and not go, oh my God, what happened?
Yeah, so I think you learn from every project that you build.
One more? Yes.
So to that point, is there something that you learned 10 years after that you wouldn't do again?
Oh, sure. Next question. I don't know, I will say that there was the woman who was to never use balconies. Is she here? Yeah. That's not 100% true. You can do balconies. You have to do them right. And they actually, if you do them right, they don't leak. So in Northern California, we have an advantage. Is we know they leak sooner than you do down here. So if they leak, you're really in big trouble. So I wouldn't rule out balconies. And remember, during the HUD period, they were value engineered out. They're important. People love them, and they're an important social aspect for people to because I was living in one of my own units that didn't have a balcony. I thought, I would kill for a balcony, for just a little bit of open space. So don't rule them out. Just get better details. Yeah. We'll talk later about this. Never rule anything out. There's a way. It might be harder. You might have to do more research. You might have to. And, sometimes you just can't do it. I mean, if you saw Richardson, the people formerly homes have no balconies, It's like we have enough to deal with without policing balconies.
Shall we say a big thank you?
Yeah, thanks again.